Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Produce Safety Educators Group. Today, we are going to be talking about the Produce Safety Inspection Calibration Program. And we have a guest speaker with us, Kristin Ash, who is going to present on the program. And before I hand things off to her, a couple of housekeeping instructions. Just a reminder, everybody is muted. There will be time for questions and discussion at the end of the meeting. So after Kristin presents today, we have a couple of panelists that are going to join us. And there will be plenty of time for questions, discussion about the program at the end of her talk. In the meantime, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A to ask questions as well. And this session will be recorded and the presentation will be shared via the listserv and on our Produce Safety Educators Group website after the call. And with that, I am going to introduce Kristin Ash today. She is a produce safety expert with the FDA Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, the Produce Safety Network. And she is out of the North Central region. I believe she's still located in Michigan. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kristin.
Thanks, Donna. Appreciate it. And thank you to this group for allowing me to share this program today. Am I good there, Donna?
Yep, it looks good.
All righty. Okay, so today I want to talk about the Produce Safety Inspection Calibration Program. And we all know that there's a challenge to consistency with any program. So with any FDA or FSMA program, the produce safety program relies on several elements to achieve the food safety goal of outreach, education, technical assistance, and a strong inspection and compliance program. From the beginning of this, Congress had concerns regarding consistency. In a report to Congress describing the federal-state integration, they indicated that a successful integrated nationwide food safety system would not be possible without the involvement of state, local, territorial, and tribal partners who will work in partnership with federal agencies to plan and implement consistent national inspection and enforcement programs. Congress has expressed concern that there's a significant variability among state inspection programs and that information is not fully shared between states and federal partners. So we'd obviously know that consistency is important, but then we had to figure out how to promote national and international consistency in the produce safety program. So to address this challenge, for the past 2 years or more, a work group that includes FDA, states, NASDA, and AFDO has been working to develop a calibration program for the produce safety rule inspections. Initially, California, Texas, Michigan, Florida, and Vermont were a part of the work group. But as we piloted the process, we wanted to add more states to the cadre. I will discuss the pilots later on, and we'll also hear from a couple of the states that participated in the pilot. So throughout a lot of the years that I spent in the field with farmers, anecdotally, I mean, I heard from a lot of them, or many of them anyway, their experiences with audits. And obviously, we all know that there's several different types of audits that have been going on for 10 plus years. And farms would say that each year their audit was different. They were expected to do different things, and there was not a lot of consistency between their year-to-year audits. So while we know that each inspector is going to have their own style, the goal is consistent interpretation of the produce safety rule. The calibration program is not intended to evaluate the candidate's basic inspection techniques or understanding and implementation of state inspectional procedures. The objectives here is that the calibration candidate will have a consistent understanding and application of the produce safety rule, consistent understanding of the underlying science, effective use of communication and education to elicit voluntary compliance, and understanding the public health significance for inspectional observations. So what does the process look like? It's designed and intended to be the same for all participants, whether it's the state or FDA. So visually here, you can see that the FDA National Calibration Officer will calibrate a state calibration officer or candidate. Once they have successfully completed the calibration process, then that state calibration officer calibrates the rest of their state inspectors. The same goes for FDA. FDA National Calibration Officers will calibrate FDA calibration candidates. Once that candidate successfully completes the calibration process, they will then be a calibration officer and can conduct calibrations on other FDA inspectors. The calibration candidates shall demonstrate knowledge of the produce safety rule provisions and the ability to apply them in light of the commodities, practices, and conditions observed on the farm. The candidate should demonstrate knowledge of the produce safety rule industry guidance, which includes enforcement discretion that is applicable to farms covered under the produce safety rule. They should also demonstrate knowledge of the underlying science and rationale for produce safety rule provisions, have essential equipment available for use during each calibration inspection, demonstrate knowledge of the equipment to conduct farm inspections, and know how to properly use and maintain the equipment. The calibration candidate should be able to demonstrate the ability to effectively communicate with the responsible party and farm employees during all phases of the calibration inspection and explain significant inspection findings to the person in charge at the conclusion of the inspection. State policies, again, and other aspects of implementation or employee performance are not evaluated in this process. So during the exercise, the candidate is expected to proceed as normal inspection. Nothing should change in how they conduct their business. They're going to take the lead, they're going to make the introductions, they're going to record all their observations and inspection data, but they may be asked during the calibration from the officer to perform specific tasks, such as explaining regulation provisions or identifying the most appropriate provision in the rule, and reviewing records just to demonstrate some proficiency in these areas. The role of the calibration officer is to confirm that the calibration candidate has the ability to conduct a routine inspection in realistic timeframes. And this is kind of a big one because we want to make sure that we're not extending our welcome on a farm when it doesn't need to be. We also want to make sure that the farm, that we're doing a thorough farm inspection. And so we expect that the time that you spend on a farm is going to be equal to what is happening on that farm, such as, do they just harvest or do they harvest and pack? Do they have 10 acres or do they have 1,000 acres? So that's going to determine the time on the farm, and it should be a realistic time frame. We also want to make sure that the candidate can recognize key pathways through which the produce may be contaminated, communicate those conditions on the farm which may not meet the standards of the produce safety rule and or may lead to conditions of public health significance. They should obviously demonstrate effective communication skills, and if necessary, they may need to push for voluntary and immediate correction of significant observations. So we did do a two-phase pilot, as I indicated before. The first phase, Texas, California, and Michigan conducted a pilot, and we understood once they came back into the work group and had some discussion that we wanted and needed to add more states to go through this process. Now, the pilot was not meant to calibrate anybody. The pilot was specifically meant to pilot the process and the papers and the documents that were involved. There was no FDA to state calibration during this. It was all within their own state. So within phase 2, we had New York, Kentucky, Tennessee, Minnesota, Washington join in. And the only FDA to FDA pilot we did was in Oregon. And in that calibration process, we learned that the form was just way too long to use in the field, as expected. So most folks will most likely keep their regular notes as they normally did, and then fill out the form after the calibration inspection. The other thing we learned is there was really no disagreements during the pilot process, and it's probably most likely due to the fact that states are within their own bubble, essentially, is if whoever is educating them or providing the technical expertise to do the inspection, then they're probably the one that is doing the calibrating as well. So it's most likely they're learning from each other, and there shouldn't be any disagreements if they're following what their state has taught them to do for an inspection. We did learn one positive thing too, is that the farmers involved seem very happy to know that there's a calibration process to assist with the consistency of produce safety inspections. So on the farm, a farm can expect 2 participants, one inspector that's going to conduct the farm inspection, and then the calibration officer that will shadow the state or FDA inspector. The inspector will do, as I said, normal business and conduct the inspection, and the calibration officer is expected to remain silent for most of the inspection. Now, they can have casual conversation. We don't want to make it weird, so they will go ahead and talk as they normally would. They just wouldn't say anything about the actual inspection itself. They may have a discussion with the inspector, but that should be very few and far between, because we don't want to interrupt the inspection, and we also don't want to take any legitimacy away from the inspector themselves. We may point out examples that illustrate produce safety rule provisions or guidance. And again, very few and far between, but the candidate may be asked by the calibration officer to perform specific tasks. The calibration officer is there to evaluate the inspector. We want to make sure that it's very clear to the farms, and this is where this group comes in, that we are not looking at the farm or the farmer. The calibration officer will only act if the candidate fails to identify a potential situation that may lead to a condition of public health significance. After the calibration exercise, following each inspection, the candidate and the calibration officer will compare findings. This will not be done on the farm. It would be awkward again for the farmer, and it's going to take a bit of time. And so they should not have that conversation on the farm, but it should be done fairly soon after the calibration process. So the rollout, as maybe most of you know, has begun. I did send out an email last week asking for states to volunteer to be a part of the process. Thank you to those states that have already done that. I have done a webinar for our industry partners so that they are aware as well. And hopefully we want to start doing our calibrations in the spring and summer of this year. And that takes me into our question session. I'll turn it back to Donna.
Excellent. Thanks, Kristin. I wanted to stop here before we get into the panel and see if anybody had questions, I guess, on the logistics of the calibration program. So any questions for Kristin? And you can either type that in the chat box, or if you raise your hand, we can unmute you so you can verbally ask. No questions. Okay. Well, feel free. We are going to have a panel discussion, so you can have a chance to think about those questions. So as we get into the panelist portion of our call, I'm going to introduce a couple of new people. So you've already heard from Kristin with the Produce Safety Network. And then we have two representatives from state departments of agriculture. The first person we have as a panelist today is Rene Nieto. He is the Produce Safety Program Coordinator with the Texas Department of Agriculture. And then we also have Amber Matulis here. She is the Produce Safety Unit Manager with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And I'm going to stop sharing screen so you guys can better see our panelists today. But the first question I had for you guys is, particularly for Rene and Amber, is can you give us a little bit of introduction maybe to who is offering inspections in your state and how that process works? I guess I'll ask Rene to go first. I think I saw him unmute first.
Yes, no, thank you. So the Department of Agriculture is who does inspections. Texas has their own program, and everything that we do goes to the Department of Agriculture. So, and we don't call them inspectors over here. Because we do quite a number of things. We're responsible for produce safety period throughout the state of Texas, not only outreach, but the implementation of the rule as well. So we're called produce safety outreach specialists, but we do double duty for the most part. And just to break it down, it's like, it's Ironman produce safety for all practical purposes, where within their assigned areas, the produce safety specialist does outreach, but when it comes time to do inspections or assessments, they go outside of their area, so that there's no conflict of interest or no bias between the people that they're working with. And so we will do all the traveling outside our area in order to do inspections outside a particular area. And yeah, that's basically how we conduct the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Rene.
Yeah, so here in Michigan, we conduct inspections under state authority. We have adopted the produce safety rule into the Michigan food law. So we do have the ability to conduct inspections under the food law, to conduct seizures, any other regulatory action that needs to take place. We do have a team at MDARD that works primarily on the regulatory side of things. We do have a few staff that are a little bit more focused on the education side. And then we rely greatly on our partners through the Conservation District produce safety technicians, and then also Michigan State University Extension, our partners there with Phil Toko and our, we really work together. We have a team that actually Kristin was integral in creating this group, the Michigan On-Farm Produce Safety Team. And so that team really is just a term that we can use to identify our group that works on produce safety. So we really focus a lot on, we're talking today about that consistency and making sure that, that consistency doesn't just span within our regulatory program, but that it goes beyond to the educational staff too, because we recognize that there's a little bit of a unique challenge when you sort of divide your regulatory and education efforts. That allows the people that specialize in those areas to do the work that they do best, but it can also create challenges for that consistency. So we do really focus on that work. We also rely a lot on our North Central region partners. We love our NCR calls. For anybody that's involved with, their region, it's a great opportunity to hear what other states are doing in terms of produce safety, and then even beyond produce safety. And then I guess jumping back just a little bit, so the produce safety unit is part of our food and dairy division within the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So when I talk about that, our food program, manufacturing and retail is within the food and dairy division. And then also obviously our dairy regulatory program is as well. So hopefully, Donna, that gives you enough everybody a little bit of a good overview of kind of how we operate here in Michigan.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I know when Kristin approached us about highlighting this calibration program for the educators call, we thought it was a really great topic because I know when I personally do trainings, we get this question a lot, realizing that there may be diversity state to state and how the produce safety rule is being adopted and inspected on. I often get questions about consistency of inspections and kind of how that looks even within states and then also applied nationally. So I thought it was great for some of our educators to hear a little bit more about calibration, because then they can probably better answer those types of questions as they come up in trainings. So Amber, I'm going to ask you next. What impact do you think that this program would have within your state? Realizing that I think Amber and Rene, both Michigan and Texas, were in the first phase of piloting this program.
Yeah, so Michigan was part of the pilot program, but that is really because Kristin was still part of our immediate MDARD team here in Michigan, and she was part of kind of creating this consistency project and rolling it out. So when she was here, she actually did one of the first like a joint calibration process with one of our inspectors here. And that's kind of how Michigan was involved early on with the calibration program. You know, we unfortunately right now, because like I said, we do conduct inspections under our own state authority, and we really have built our program not only on the foundation of that national consistency, but also on the expectation that we will have Michigan regulators on Michigan farms. And so at this point in time, with FDA coming onto Michigan farms to conduct those calibration exercises, that's not something that we can participate in. But we know that, you know, Kristin is doing her due diligence to reach out to states and understand how this calibration program is going to work and what the challenges are. And I think that's really, you know, what she's voiced that she's hoping to hear here today, like what that perspective is. So, you know, I really appreciate that opportunity. And, you know, she and I have had a few emails back and forth to be able to discuss that. And I've expressed that concern and that maybe there are some ways to overcome that through maybe conducting calibrations on farms that are under FDA authority. So maybe Michigan inspector, or, you know, an inspector from Michigan or an inspector from another state that's conducting inspections under their own state authority. Maybe there would be some flexibility there to overcome that concern. We really, you know, I have major concern about sort of that approach of having FDA staff on farm if it's not related to an outbreak. We understand that, you know, you can communicate as much as you want, but there may be some perception concern there. So that is kind of, you know, our main concern. But what I want to kind of, I guess, focus on a little bit here without being too long-winded would be to say that we recognize that this idea of having national consistency is critical. And I really appreciate the work that other states, the FDA, you know, that NASDA, that you as educators have had a role in developing this approach to consistency, because we recognize that it's really critical. So one of the things, you know, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the produce program standard development. And so as we develop those produce regulatory program standards, I would love to see this consistency kind of project and effort kind of get baked into those standards, so that this is something that's not simply optional, but that it is prioritized within the scope of our cooperative agreements, and that we have the expectation that we will be participating in this program to ensure that consistency. So I'm sure that may be part of the discussion already, but I just think that would be a really great thing to see kind of that get integrated into the development of those standards.
Thanks, Amber. Rene, did you have anything to add about sort of the impact that you think this calibration program would have within your state?
Mute button. Well, we're hoping, like everybody else, is that consistency becomes the biggest thing. And it's really not based on perception of an individual as much as what does the rule say and what is the grower doing at the time that these activities are happening to meet the minimum requirements of the standard. And we saw the importance of that from the very beginning. When we talked to other states about how things are going and what they're doing, we actually a couple of years ago had one state, a farmer from Oklahoma who was also growing stuff in Texas, was basically saying, well, Oklahoma lets us do it this way. How come Texas doesn't? And if it wasn't for our close relationship with the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, we never would have known what they were trying to refer to what was happening on an on-farm readiness review, whereas we were trying to do, regulatory work. So hopefully this will be, a national thing where, yes, there not only is a minimum requirements for the grower, but, an understanding that's consistent with how everyone's implementing the rule based upon what they're looking at and what they're seeing at the time that they're there. So.
Thanks, Renee. I see there are a couple.
Yep, go into the chat. Thank you.
Perfect.
Kristen's queued up.
Excellent. I was actually going to ask a pre-question to Mike's questions in the chat. I think maybe to get into these questions is this program required?
That's a great question. Thank you, Donna. Currently, no. It is now voluntary at this point for states to participate.
Okay.
And do you want me to go ahead and speak to Mike's question?
Absolutely. Yeah. So his first question was, is one farm visit sufficient to accurately assess if the inspector is properly calibrated?
No. So the process outlines that each calibration candidate must go through 5 calibration inspections within a 12-month period. And within that, there can be no more than 3 disagreements per calibration inspection, or 10 total across the 5. If that happens, then the calibration candidate will fail the calibration, but the expectation there is that there will be a discussion with the program manager and the candidate to see what areas through education that we can help to resolve this.
Thanks, Kristin. And I think you addressed all 3 of those questions, correct? Time frame. Yep.
There's another one that just came in from Jessica. Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
So Kristin, thanks, Betsy. There was a question asking if this person understood that once an individual is calibrated, that they then become a calibration officer, and then can they calibrate other staff? So I'm guessing within a state, if one person within that state, for example, becomes calibrated, because then are they then allowed to calibrate staff that they work with?
Yes, that's the goal, is that an FDA National Inspection Officer will calibrate a designated person within each state. And once they have successfully completed the process, then they would be able to calibrate the rest of the inspectors within their state. Now, if it's not possible, if a state only has 2 inspectors and they prefer for FDA to do the calibration on both inspectors, then that's something that we can certainly talk about as well.
Excellent. And then, so the questions are rolling in the chat box. A lot of people are interested. There was a question asking if a state participates, will our inspectors be able to participate during our winter season, since that is when we have the majority of our inspections conducted?
Yeah, we will be in a state at any point in time that they are doing growing, harvesting, packing. Yeah, it will be up to the state to let us know when they want us there. It'll be up to them to schedule the inspections, to get all of the logistics done.
Excellent. Thank you.
And there was a question, I think, before that where it said, is this a one-time process only? And the answer to that is no. We expect that folks are recalibrated every 3 years.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's good to know. So is that 3-year recalibration similar to the initial recalibration that you outlined with multiple inspections, or?
Yep, there will be multiple. That one is 3 inspections instead of 5. So there's a couple less calibration inspections.
Okay, perfect. So I am going to turn back. I see I'm going to wait for that next question in the chat box about enforcement discretion. I'm going to turn back to the rest of the panel. And I did, because realizing that we're speaking with an audience of primarily educators, it is a pretty diverse audience looking from the attendees. But why do you think it's important to highlight this particular calibration program to educators? So what are you hoping that people listening in are going to get out of this call?
Well, my main goal is that they can express what the program is about and let farms know that we're not there as FDA. We're not there to take a look at your farm. We're not going to judge your farm. We're there simply to conduct the consistency inspection with the candidate so that we have a national calibration or consistency program. But the biggest thing is the educators are going to get the calls, they're going to get the questions, they're going to get the concerns. And if educators are aware of the program and understand that this is a process meant to overall help farmers and make sure that inspection to inspection is consistent, then they can address that. They can make sure that some of these fears are diminished and help also to promote the program with the farms so that they're more accepting to having FDA on their farm, which I know is a concern.
Yeah. Amber or Renee, do you have anything to add there?
No, I just want to reiterate, this is no way for states that have their own program like Texas. This is no way to say that FDA is going to commandeer or take over the inspection or the inspection process. For states that have their own program, it's still a state, inspection. And it's the state's responsibility to do their job. FDA is essentially looking to see the consistency and how we're doing that job. But it's still a state program. The state is going to do their inspection. The state's going to be expected to do their job as they should. It just so happens that we have someone to make sure that what we're doing and how we're doing it is going to be consistent with the current thinking of the agency.
So Renee, I'll jump to you, I guess, for this next question. On this topic, do you think that farms, I'll say within your state, within Texas, are going to be concerned with having additional inspectors on the farm? Is there anything that you guys might try to do to alleviate those concerns that also these educators can pass along?
Well, it's one of the things, and as everybody knows or should know, that these inspections for the most part are going to be scheduled. It really is in Texas our responsibility to set up a time, location, what we're going to do, where we're going to go, and all these other things as a way of figuring out the logistics of what we're going to do. A completely scheduled inspection. When these things happen, the expectation is that we will then say, oh, by the way, we've got these other things going on. Again, to keep the grower, the facility, wherever we're going to go, fully involved in the communication process, outline who's going to be doing what and the reason why FDA would be there. And again, with the understanding from FDA that the state is going to do their job and going to do their part, and FDA is just looking at the individual and not the farm in and of itself. So it really goes back to when we set up the inspection to begin with, that we're putting all of these additional details to let the growers know, okay, this is all the other stuff that's going to happen again. So, and I think that was one of those things that as a group, we wanted to make sure that we understood that the responsibility goes to the state to make sure that this information is carried to the grower at the facility that we're going to be going to.
As always, communication, right? Excellent. Amber, do you have anything to add?
I don't, but thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So just a reminder for everybody listening in, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, or if you see that little raised hand button along the bottom, I think in the middle, if you click that, one of us can unmute you and you can verbally ask questions as well. So I'm going to go back to the chat box. Mike asked a question about enforcement discretion. So this will be to anybody on the panel who wants to answer. Enforcement discretion was brought up in the discussion on proposed changes to agricultural water. Is there some degree of enforcement discretion that allows, is there some degree of enforcement that allows for enforcement discretion that would be part of the calibration process? That's a good question.
Seems to me like an FDA question. I don't know.
I was gonna say, I'm waiting for Kristin to unmute, and she's probably thinking, I gotta talk to my boss.
We all are. We all are. Go on.
So I think I'll say here, as Kristin thinks, that with subpart E and pretty new proposed requirements, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. So I'm sure there's a lot to be decided with this new pilot program.
So as Kristin's marinated, let me just go ahead and say, whatever the proposed rule is going to be, whatever that final outcome is going to be, at least for Texas, we're not going to go the very next day and start implementing that rule, because there's still a lot of things that need to be figured out. So we're still have to work through that process as well, as best we can as a state. How the calibration process happens, again, it's up to the state to kind of figure out when is the right time for them to do the calibration to begin with. So I don't know if that helps or hurts Kristin's answer about anything, but yeah, it's that final rule, whenever that comes in, it's not going to be an automatic, okay, tomorrow we're starting type of a situation, at least not in Texas. So Kristin.
And this is Michelle Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I got a little note asking me to unmute because I'm a terribly slow typist, and I'll get rid of my chat when I'm done. I think at this point, with the ag water proposal just being a proposal, and I'm guessing Kristin can correct me, for calibration with respect to ag water, we might look to a regulator doing an inspection the way we're currently handling it for ag water, which is basically to make sure that the ag water use is not in any way in conflict with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, that there's not some kind of situation that would likely adulterate the product. So we're not enforcing any of the ag water requirements per se, but we still can look at ag water against the act. So that's what I would say.
Yes, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate you jumping in there. Exactly what I was going to say is we're going to be conducting the calibration inspection based on what's regulated in the rule. We're not going to be calibrating against any proposed rules, such as the water right now. So we're expecting that states are going to conduct inspections as they normally would, with the enforcement discretions in place as they are, and continue an inspection on everything that is finalized and nothing that is proposed.
Thank you. Okay, so there's another great question in the chat box from Kristin. I've heard tales about inconsistencies in audits, not specifically produce safety, for farms operating in multiple states. Is there a best place to direct people with concerns if it is related to produce safety audits that don't seem to align?
So when they say audits in the bottom half of their comment, I'm assuming they mean inspection. I'm
gonna guess that as well.
Okay. So yeah, if there's concerns.
Sorry, I keep hitting my video when I'm muting and unmuting, so I apologize for flicking. I do think it is important right now to pause and to make it clear the difference between audits and inspections. Just so we're, okay, I see yes, inspection has come up, but just so we're clear, audits are voluntary, inspections are not. And audits are ordered by the farm for market. Inspections are not. So go ahead, Kristin, sorry to interrupt.
No, thanks, Betsy. I appreciate that. think it's good to clear that up with everybody. So yes, if farmers, or you're hearing that farmers are concerned with inspection, produce safety inspection and consistency, you can certainly direct any of those concerns direct to me.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I'll remind you, these are some good questions coming in the chat box. Here is another one. Calibration is a good thing. Having inspectors all on the same page is critical. The same then is true for us educators. Will there be an effort to align what the inspectors are being trained to and us educators? We seem to have differences of interpretation between educators and inspectors on some topics. We should all be aligned. Interesting, good comment.
Yeah, I'll start, and I think that Rene and Amber probably has something to add to this. But Donna, you said they said that calibration is a good thing. I think they actually said it's a great thing. I'm just going to point that out.
I should say I'm terrible at thinking as I'm reading and interpreting in my head at the same time. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
So calibration is a great thing. I appreciate that. Thank you. And unfortunately, if there are differences between educators and inspectors, I would encourage you to go back to your state and try and maybe work through some programs or educational things that you can do together. I know, and I want to, because I came from Michigan, so I know the process there. So I want to hand this over to Amber and how they handle that there in Michigan.
Yeah, thanks, Kristin. And if I missed something, fill in the blanks. Yeah, in Michigan, I talked a little bit about our Michigan on-farm produce safety team. And again, that is our educators, our technical assistant staff, and our regulators that all work together. Some of the things that we do here in Michigan, at least I'll say pre-COVID, we would try to have meetings at least 2 to 3 times a year where we actually in person all came together, everybody from around the state, and we would meet up and have a couple-day session where we would talk about different aspects of produce safety rule implementation and ensuring that we were on a consistent playing field, that we were communicating with one another, that we were understanding farm scenarios in a similar way and understanding how to apply the PSR equally, if you will. So I think that is a big part of what we do. We also have monthly on-farm produce safety team meetings. And so those are just virtual meetings where we come together for an hour or so and we meet up. If there is something that comes about, like the water rule drop, we all gather more frequently as needed. And so we've had a number of meetings that have come up like that. We try to make sure that when we have public outreach events that we are all working together and present at those, at least to some degree. Obviously, educators, I think you're all aware that there have been some funding cuts recently for some states, and with the newest 5-year produce safety cooperative agreement program, Michigan has definitely seen, a drop in their funding to some extent, and that has meant that we've had to cut back in different places. So I think that is one thing as we talk about calibration, consistency moving forward, we need to make sure that the funding is there to allow for this collaboration and to allow for us to work together and to find that time and really prioritize that effort for the consistency. But it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to have a virtual meeting. So that's a really great thing. We've all learned that we can, find ways to connect relatively inexpensively. So I will say, we really we focus on that relationship and we focus on trying to build that consistency and having conversation. But I think this is a really great point that calibration effort, that consistency effort, it really goes back to the individual states working together with all of their partners and ensuring that there is that consistency even within the state. And I will say also for our inspectors, we typically conduct joint inspections. So inspectors go out together on farm whenever possible. And then we try to mix up the groups that are going out to do, or the pair that's going out to do those inspections, just so that throughout the state, you know, we have a relatively small number of staff, but we do want to make sure that they are working together and that there is that consistency, and that, you know, it's one thing to talk about it, but that really, that on-farm application is critical. We also encourage our growers to invite their produce safety technician to come on farm with at the time of the inspection. So we want that technician there, because when the regulators leave, you know, the inspectors are there for maybe 4 or 5 hours at most. And then when they're gone, what is the grower going to do with the information they were given? And so that technician provides the opportunity for them to keep working on things. Obviously on-farm readiness reviews, all of those things we really focus on. But I would say, you know, just recognizing that we all play a very critical role, and that it is our duty to really ensure that consistency, to make sure that our farmers are getting the same inspection here in Michigan as they are in Texas and Florida and, you know, whatever state, but also from inspector to inspector, inspector to educator. So I'll pass it off to Rene if he's got anything to add.
What else is there to add? You know, my background is complete regulatory in nature. I am a regulator for the last 30 some odd years. And while I do realize the perspective from an inspection and an outreach activity could be somewhat different, it's also important to understand that the rule is what needs to be consistent, and the understanding of the rule and knowing of the rule is what needs to be consistent. In Texas, again, you know, in order for that farm to get that fair shake, you know, it really is based upon what is happening at that time, and then going into those discussions, if we see things that are not meeting the minimum requirements of the rule, on what can be done to address those situations, to identify, is this a single thing that's happening just that day, or is this a trend? And so it really goes into discussing those types, you know, of things with the growers, to an extent of what is going to happen to prevent this thing from happening again, not just for today, but, you know, moving forward. You know, for such a big state, we're challenged with a lot of, you know, how we're going to do things. Implementation of the rule has not been easy from the very beginning. Nothing's gone the way we wanted to. Nothing has gone the way we've planned, but we've adapted with the challenges. And a lot of it is working with, you know, the educators, other partners, other associations, and even other states. That communication continues and needs to continue. Prior to a lot of things that were happening with FDA and NASDA, I would say that states were learning more from each other, you know, to start everything as best as they possibly could. And this is where we started looking and seeing how inconsistent other states' views were. If anything, that gave us the more of a reason why we should have a program like this, to ensure that, yes, you know, what one person heard from a class from FDA 2 years ago is the same ideology that's happening today and right now. You know, so yeah, there's still a lot of collaboration that's happening. There's still a lot of collaboration that needs to continue. And no one thing is going to answer everybody's questions. It's got to be a group effort, and this is one way to unite that group.
Thanks, Rene, and Amber and Kristin. Okay, so I don't see any other questions per se in the chat box, and I'm looking at the clock. So I have a question to turn around to ask the participants. So the folks who have been listening in for the past 50 or so minutes on this call, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the role that this calibration program is going to fulfill. So in working with growers, have you received feedback from growers about concerns regarding consistency of inspections within your states? Is this something that you think a calibration program that's going to be well received within your state?
You guys can feel free to answer that in the chat or unmute.
Yep. Okay. So Betsy, I'll get you to help me. Oh, somebody raised their hand. So if you just raise your hand if you want to be unmuted, and Betsy or I will give you that permission.
Okay.
Okay. It just takes a minute. So Valeria, you are allowed to speak. You can unmute yourself.
I think it's consistencies within the state, but I think the problem is between states. And I thought when we were doing the calibration program, how great it would be to do the calibration program with someone from a nearby state, say Kentucky, because I'm in Tennessee, or something like that. We only had a few classes to become regulators, inspectors, or whatever. And I think that that we need to see what other states are doing, and the states need to get together before we think about a whole federal calibration. Or we need more details from the FDA as to addressing inconsistency. So I don't know how we'd go about finding these inconsistencies unless we worked with other states. And it could just be a neighboring state, you know, because I know travel is expensive for everybody. But I'd love to see how other states are handling their inspections. That's it.
Thanks, Valeria.
There's a comment, Donna, from Kelly Hughes in the chat box. She thinks big and small farms and states will appreciate the consistency between them. She also thinks it'll be good across the states because the farmers talk, and it will be good on our part if they are consistent that way they don't feel like they're being judged or anything. Anytime you have something, we all know that as soon as one thing happens to a farmer and they get talking to each other, that stuff spreads like wildfire. We deal with it in the PSA. It's why we hammer on consistency across trainings and making sure everything is the same, is because you don't want to get the reputation of offering something that is inconsistent or shoddy. And I think the inspectors feel the same way we do as educators. Nobody wants to be associated with a shoddy program. It does you no good. It just creates more work. So I think educators and inspectors have that piece in common anyway.
Yep. And I really like to hear about I think you said there was a requirement of doing 5 inspections. So I think that really helps to kind of nail down that diversity of agriculture they might see. So there is a question in the chat box. Does FDA plan on making calibration mandatory for states conducting inspections in the future? I know you currently said it was voluntary, but is that going to stay?
Yes. Yep, it's currently voluntary. It's a great question. There is discussion on the table that it could potentially be mandatory in the future, but it's nothing concrete. There's nothing that we're really putting out there at this point. It's just a voluntary program. We want to have states feel good about going through the process. But no, I do understand some folks wanting for it to be mandatory, and Amber's comments earlier that if we make it part of the cap or something to that nature in the future, to make it mandatory, because then we would have a better chance at a consistent program throughout the nation. But yeah, that's where we are at this point, is it's just in the talks. And I did want to mention too, Donna, when you said that there is 5 inspections, calibration inspections that need to happen over the course of 12 months, it also should be representative of that inspector's workload. So if they're doing large, small, and very small farms, then it should be representative of that. If they're doing all large leafy greens, then that's primarily what we should be looking at. So it should be representative of their work as well.
Thank you. There's a great question from Annalisa in the chat box. Can a grower opt out of having a calibration happen during their inspection? That's a great question.
This is a really great question, and I think that's going to depend on that's going to be a state thing. Again, it's voluntary on our end, and how a state wants to handle setting these inspections up within their state is going to be up to them. I'm assuming that most states will say yes. But again, that's going to be up to the states.
Thank you. I think we have a few educators. I think this is what Robert and Kristin are asking in the chat box, but chime in if I'm hitting this wrong. I think they're sort of asking if educators will have the opportunity to go along with inspections to see the consistency. Is that what you guys are asking? Because I'm not sure that's going to fly, but in the same way we've been trying to get into the training and we oftentimes can't get in, but I think there's two points here. One is educators need to be consistent in our understanding and what we share with growers. So I do not disagree with that. And the PSA has put a lot of effort in. I'm not sure if Robert wants to unmute and actually clarify. So let him unmute and clarify so I'm not making stuff up.
No, I don't think we would want to do that, tagging along with inspectors. But I like the idea before about having joint meetings together where we can talk about what's being seen, how is it being handled, maybe come up with like some scenarios to work through or something, so that we're meeting together, and we're sharing information and things like that. I think that would be very, very helpful. I think that I think that might be the approach for us here. And for others like that. That would be simple. It would be not high pressure kind of thing, and I think it would be successful. So
Yeah.
I really like that idea.
When we first started, at least in the Northeast, and I think the North Central does this too, the Northeast, there used to be a call once every month or every so often where we'd get together and the inspectors would say what they were seeing so the educators knew what were big topics. But that is something we can certainly, the PSA could take it on, but it seems like it might be smarter on a regional basis to keep it smaller.
Sure.
But I love that idea. And I'm going to leave Rene and Amber weigh in. This is going to be the last one. So Donna can wrap this bad boy up and get us out the door nearly on time. But thank you for the clarification, Robert.
Yeah. If I can add with the time ticking away. All you educators out there, especially if you're with the extensions, press the Department of Agriculture to share that information with you. We share the data with our educators, with Texas A&M. We don't give them farm names, but we tell them, look, this is what we see within the given year, and we give them that data so that they can start looking at ways on how to target certain things when they're doing their classes. Questions for implementations, I believe they should go to the whoever's implementing this rule so that there's an understanding of how it's going to happen. Now, the trick about that is that we're not training people how to get out of being regulated by the rule, because we've actually seen people try to figure out what they can do not to be covered by this rule. So that there's still some of those issues that having to work out, but there still have to be a good partnership with those individuals who are implementing the rule and those people who are educating on the rule, and a lot and it's a case by case basis from farm to farm. So we don't give blanket answers on what happens if you see this. Well, it depends. A lot of that stuff happens on. But there definitely should be constant communications with those individuals who are implementing the rule and those individuals who are doing the education, because they really should work together, to ensure that the understanding is there on both sides.
Thanks, Rene. And that was some very good questions and discussion at the very end, especially. So with that, realizing it is top of the hour, I know a number of the state folks, I think, have a call to get to. So I just want to thank you guys. Thank you, Kristin, for suggesting this topic. I think this was a great topic that we do get a lot of questions about in our outreach programs. Thank you to Rene and Amber for joining us on the panel and answering those questions. I think having some of the details from how this is going to work out in your state was really, really good. So thank you guys very much. I realize we're at the top of the hour, but I wanted to quickly share a couple of PSA centric news before we move on. So I think you should be seeing my screen. Very quickly, I wanted to introduce the newest member of the PSA team, Mariana Villarreal Silva. She is our new Spanish language extension associate. She's located in California. She has a background in food science and technology from Texas A&M and has a very diverse background. So I will let her unmute if she wants to and just say a quick hi.
Hello, everyone. Happy to help here. Happy to join.
Yeah, and Mariana joined us at the beginning of February, so just about a month ago, and she has kind of jumped right in with both feet. You might have already heard from her. She's been doing a lot of translations and supporting of resources and some of the ongoing Subpart E outreach efforts. So with that, I also want to mention that we are going to be hosting a second Spanish language Subpart E office hour coming up. We hosted the first Spanish language one last week. We thought we were just going to be hosting one, but there was a lot of discussion, a lot of questions. So we've decided to host one additional session that is going to be coming up in Monday, March 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern. We did set up a registration website, and I'll include that link in the wrap-up email that you guys will receive later for this call. And then the last thing I want to mention is that we are hiring a new Southwest Regional Extension Associate. So this call, I know I've been putting it in some of the other educators' call website or emails, but we are still reviewing applications there. So we will start reviewing probably pretty shortly. So with that, as always, here's our website. Just a reminder, we do have a Spanish language website as well. But I want to thank everybody for that really great conversation. I know I took home a number of take homes that I'm going to share during trainings. But thank you all to our speaker and panelists, and for those of you who unmuted and added into the conversation. Thank you all and have a nice afternoon.